Now we move on to our next news. EU Economy Commissioner Valdis Dombrovskis has confirmed that the European Commission is exploring countermeasures in response to China's recent curbs on rare earth exports. In a recent interview, Dombrovskis has noted that while specific measures have not been identified yet, the discussion, however, is ongoing. The EU Commissioner has further clarified that any countermeasures would be coordinated with international partners, including discussions held at the recent G7 finance ministers meeting in Washington, which he had just attended. China's curbs on rare earth exports have remained tight even after a July agreement to expedite shipments to Europe. Earlier this month, Beijing announced further expansions of these curbs, further complicating EU supply chains. Additionally, in response to these restrictions, the EU Trade Chief Maros Sefcovic has scheduled meetings with Chinese officials to seek urgent solutions regarding rare earth exports. The pressure on EU leaders is mounting, particularly from industries affected by China's new export conditions. Now for this discussion, we welcome Professor Stefan Nagy. He's a professor of International Christian University, joins us live from Tokyo. Thank you very much, Professor Stefan, for joining us again. Good to see you. Professor, how should European Union balance its economic dependence on Chinese rare earth exports with the need to protect strategic industries and ensure secure supply chain?
Well, the solution is short, mid, and long term. In reality, that the Chinese today monopolize not only the mines, but also the processing of rare earth materials. So in the short term, European countries working together, probably with the United States, Australia, and others, will need to find ways to secure rare earth materials and then engage in the processing. In the mid to long term, I think that there's technological solutions and finding new partners which will decrease China's leverage using rare earth materials as a form of a coercive policy. And in this sense, I think China has applying rare earth material embargoes or limiting the supplies is really a one-shot weapon to try and shape the behavior of Europeans and other countries. And over the mid to long term, it will no longer be viable and they'll lose their leverage. So Europeans need to be patient. They need to be pragmatic about who they and where they get rare earth materials from, but they also have to invest in the technology to process them in the short term to maintain their economic edge. And again, think about this over the mid to long term.
And what kinds of countermeasures could the EU realistically implement without escalating trade tension? And how might coordination with, maybe G7 partners or other EU members strengthen its position?
So we know that China, again, has monopolized the rare earth supplies in terms of purchasing mines. I think they have about 60 to 70% of the mines and 90% of the processing. So this is the bottleneck that European countries need to work with and work within. They can apply leverage on China by limiting access to its market. They can apply China by through diplomatic action that pressures China on other issues that may be sensitive to China. This could be engaging with Taiwan. It could be on South China Sea issues. It could be on trade that is important for keeping the Chinese economy going. Remember, China is an export-dominant and dependent country. If it's not exporting its goods to Europe or other parts around the world, it's not getting currency to keep their economy going. This has to be very clear. It has to be put on the table, and the Europeans have to very much, embody a trade policy that reflects how the Chinese engage in trade. They connect everything, and they're willing to apply pressure to the Europeans to shape the behavior. The Europeans should do the same, but do this alongside the G7 members, of course with the United States, Australia, Japan, and others. It's only through collective action that they can really manage this challenge.
How do you think, how would that look like? How might this friction between EU and China influence Europe's broader economic and diplomatic strategy moving forward?
So I think it's important for us to understand that Europe's problem is very much related to the broader US-China strategic competition. The US and China are competing in terms of technology, who's dominating the AI and quantum computing, and who's shaping the rules of the road. And Beijing is very much interested in revising the post-Cold War rules-based order and making it an order that is in favor of Chinese interests and Chinese priorities. In that sense, as we think about the Europe cooperating moving forward and how it's going to manage this important relationship, I think again it has to really work with like-minded countries like Japan in the Indo-Pacific region to shape the Indo-Pacific region, to make it a multipolar region which pulls the center of economic gravity away from China and distributes from India, Southeast Asian countries, Japan, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand access, and of course the US. By doing this, Europe will have more strategic autonomy in how it manages its relationship with China, but it will also have more strategic autonomy in how it manages its relationship with the United States. And this means, again, it means working with partners that have similar broader objective of decentering the global economy away from China towards a broader distribution of countries and regions that really decreases China's leverage and ensures that China plays by rules rather than breaks those rules.
Thank you very much for sharing that thorough insight, Professor Stefan Nagy, for joining us today and also sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you. Now we stay in the region. Germany has reclaimed China as its largest trading partner in the